It's 2012, and I'm in my car in a parking lot at the Whitehall Rehabilitation Center in Deerfield, Illinois, and I am crying my eyes out. I've just come from a conversation that wasn't really a conversation with my mom, who was suffering from dementia. She didn't really know who I was. I would try to steer the conversation and get it back to reality, and she still thought she was a nurse in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I might be a doctor. And a few months later, when she passed, I reflected on the fact that we really didn't connect in these sort of crucial last moments of her life, and I was filled with such regret over that. A couple years later, I'm in my car, it's a Saturday, and I'm listening to This American Life on NPR, which I always listen to. And the story that comes on is about these two improvisers, and they are caring for their mom who suffers from dementia. And what they're doing is using improv skills to do this. And in particular, they talk about this idea around yes and. And the idea there is when groups of people are making something out of nothing, when they have no script, saying no doesn't get you anywhere. And you can't stop by just saying yes. You have to say yes and. You have to affirm and contribute in order to explore and heighten. And I pull over my car into another parking lot. This is the Walgreens on Ashland, and start crying again. Because I'm doing the edits on my book, Yes and, about how you can take improvisation into organizations and business to better collaborate and communicate, and I never, ever thought I could use it for caring. So I'm out on book tour with my book, and any author who tells you they don't do this is lying. When you have written a book and you go to a new city, you go to a bookstore to see if your book is on the shelf. So I'm going to these various cities, and I've written a business book, and so I'm looking at the other business books, and I notice something, that there's a lot of books on the art of negotiation in business, and they all mention improv, but don't go any deeper. So when I'm done with book tour and go back to Second City, my boss is like, do you got anything new you want to create? And I'm like, yes. Well, if we found an academic, and we collaborated on a negotiation and improv workshop? He's like, great, go do it. So I Google academic Chicago negotiation, and I pick the first 5 professors who come from named universities in Chicago, and I send them all emails. 4 of them get back to me within 24 hours. By the end of the week, I have got at least 2 who want to do the deal and 1 that I'm about to close the deal with. That's when I get an email from the 5th academic, Eugene Caruso at the University of Chicago. And he says, hey, I'm sorry I didn't reach out earlier. Do you still want to talk? Now, old Kelly would have been like, I'm good, got this thing going. But new Kelly is in this like Shonda Rhimes Year of Yes bowl. So I'm like, sure, let's meet. And he goes, great, I'm going to invite my wife, Heather. I think she'd be interested in this. So I go up to Hyde Park, and I'm in their office talking to Eugene and Heather Caruso. And I'm doing my rap on improvisation. And that rap includes this, that improvisation is yoga for your social skills. Okay? Improvisation is loud, noisy group mindfulness. Improvisation is a practice in being unpracticed, which is how all of us live every single day. Eugene is checking emails, he's not interested. Heather, locked in. And when I finish, Heather says, Kelly, we're behavioral scientists. We have decades and decades of research that show us that people make bad decisions for themselves. You're talking about a practice and a pedagogy that allows people to make different and better choices. Those two things have never been put together. And a few months later, we announced this collaboration, the Second Science Project, which looks at behavioral science through the lens of improvisation. Side note, the guy who signed off on this at the Center for Decision Research at Booth was Richard Thaler, who would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Economics. Pretty cool. So why? Why is this important? We have anecdotal evidence over 60 years at Second City that this stuff changes lives. But now we have evidence and data that can either back it up or allow us to make new discoveries. So I'll give you an example. So early on in the project, we met with a bunch of the scholars, and we had a bunch of improvisers, and they said, take us through an improv exercise, let's put it in the lab. So I'm going to take you through an improv exercise. I'm not going to make you improvise, calm down, it's all going to be okay. We did this thing called Yes And, the Yes And exercise. And we start by pairing up people, person A and person B. Person A is going to pitch a reunion for today's event. Person B, your job is to say no in as many ways as possible, go. Do that for a minute. Then we have person B pitch the reunion event to person A. Person A's job is to say yes, but to every initiation, go. And when we unpack that with people, some people are like, yeah, that feels like a normal conversation at work. Some people like the yes but better, but really that's just no with a bow tie. It's no different. And then we lead them through the third pillar of this exercise, yes and. So your job, person A, is to pitch your idea. Person B, you say yes to it and add something. Person A, you say yes to that and add something, go. Invariably, the room is louder, there's more laughs. When I come to them later, they're having sushi on the moon. It's like nuts. It's great. Yes and is a way to get into an abundant amount of ideas. So I give this kind of talk a lot to different business groups. And invariably, there's a guy, and it's always a guy in the back who raises his hand and says, if I yes-anded every idea that came into my office, I'd get nothing done. Two things I know. That guy is a nightmare to work with. No one wants to work with that guy. And two, he is missing the point because yes and operates at the front end of innovation. It is 5 minutes at the beginning of a brainstorm. Just think about that. Take that moment. Okay, so the scholars are watching this, and they are like, get it, we got it, there's evidence to back up what you're doing, we'll give that to you, terrific. We have a problem, and they're academics, they're supposed to look for problems. They say, what happens when you have an intractable situation? What happens when the person across from you can't yes and because you don't agree at all? And we're like, I don't know, let's think about it. Do you have science on this? They go, we think we do. And so we started collaborating. And we found the fourth pillar. And the fourth pillar is thank you because. And the idea here is, if we're supposed to stay inside this conversation, and it's difficult, and I disagree with you, but I need to stay inside it. We need to collaborate. The only way I can do that is if I thank you for what you gave me, setting off the gratitude part of the brain, and then the because is crucial. Then I need to explain back to you what you just said and why it's important to you. And that person then they'll feel seen and they'll feel heard. And this is actually based on a scientific principle called self-verification theory. I think most of us think we want to be seen as our best selves, our prettiest selves, our smartest selves. Self-verification theory shows us something different. It shows us that we want to be seen as we see ourselves. So if I see myself as clumsy, it's important that you see me as clumsy so you won't throw me a ball. But I'm a human being, I'm tricky, I'm not going to say that to you. That same summer, I got a call from Adam Grant, the Wharton professor who wrote the book Give and Take. And he said, I've got a friend moving to Chicago, I-Jen Poo, will you meet with her? And I'm like, sure, because if I say no, I'll end up a villain in your next book. I-Jen is a 2015 MacArthur Genius Grantee. She is the co-director of Caring Across Generations. They are trying to change the conversation around caring. You also might know her as Meryl Streep's date at the last Golden Globes. And as I met her for lunch and I started talking about yes and thank you because, she's like, this is what the caregivers need. This is what the whole caregiving community needs, ways to communicate more effectively, especially when the realities are different. And so I brought in my wife, Ann Libra, and we worked with Caring Across Generations and presented an Improvisation for Caregivers program at the Aspen Ideas Festival. Ruth Allman at the Cleveland Clinic took our workshop, and she got us a grant, and we actually created a 6-week Improv for Caregivers program at the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas. And it went really well, and the data is really strong. Same time period, I got the news that my brother Kyle was diagnosed with cancer. And he was given 2 to 5 years, it was really 2. And this last Christmas, he got put into hospice. And I was able to take all of this stuff and bring it to his bedside. I stayed with him even when he was out of it, and we had really good, authentic conversations. And I was so sad, of course, when he passed, but I had no regret. So that's where the story was going to end when they invited me to do this talk. But life is not scripted, and other things have happened. On August 29th, Wednesday, I had packed my bags and I was going to go do a keynote about this topic for the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio when I got a call from my 16-year-old daughter, Nora. She had been having pains in her back and the pain was just terrible. So I turned around and I took her to the emergency room at Illinois Masonic, and they had us go to Lurie Children's Hospital, and that evening we found out that she was diagnosed with cancer in her liver and her lungs. So the last 11 weeks, I've been a caregiver. And I've been working with nurses and doctors and administrators. And what have I learned? A few things. One, everything I'm telling you is 100% true. We have a phrase in improvisation, play the scene you're in, not the scene you want to be in. Because if I linger in the past or the future, I'm screwed. when I'm present with her in the moment, it's incredible. We have a phrase, see all obstacles as gifts. I don't want to be in this position. I have never spent such quality time with my daughter. We've had incredible moments. And we have a phrase, bring a brick, not a cathedral. So many of us try to solve our problems by bringing in these cathedrals when all we need to do is bring in bricks. Each of us participate, we're an ensemble. I've also learned that we're a culture that values youth over age. People were great when my parents were dying, but they weren't trying to move heaven and earth like they're doing with Nora. So I guess the lesson here is we have to value life, and we have to give people skills and practice and agency in improvising their own scripts. And we need to give people practice and skills and agency in writing better scripts. Thank you.